Imagine spending your life hunting, torturing, and killing innocent people, only for karma to catch up in the most brutal, ironic, or pathetic way possible. Today, we look at how some of the world's most notorious serial killers met their ends. Some died screaming, some died quietly, and some, well, you'll see. Let's begin with more depth on these monsters who terrorized for years before justice or fate finally intervened. First, Ted Bundy, the charming law student turned predator who confessed to 30 murders, though experts believe the real number could be much higher. He targeted young women, often college students, luring them with fake injuries or his good looks. He escaped prison twice. Once by jumping out a courthouse window during his own trial, and continued his spree in Florida, where he bludgeoned sorority sisters and kidnapped a 12-year-old girl. In 1989, after exhausting appeals, Bundy faced the electric chair in Florida State Prison. On January 24th, he was strapped down. He requested and ate his last meal of steak, eggs, hash browns, toast with butter and jam, plus coffee and juice, though he barely touched much of it. Witnesses described him as calm but pale. When the switch was thrown, 2,000 volts coursed through his body. His frame convulsed violently for over a minute. Smoke actually rose from his leg where one electrode was attached. His brain was fried, literally. Pronounced dead at 7:16 a.m. for a killer who thrived on control and fear, dying in a blaze of electricity felt poetically just. Next, Jeffrey Dahmer, known as the Milwaukee Cannibal. He murdered 17 young men and boys between 1978 and 1991. He lured victims to his apartment, drugged them, strangled or stabbed them, then dismembered bodies, preserved skulls and genitals in jars, experimented with acid to dissolve flesh, and admitted to cannibalism and necrophilia. Police discovered a refrigerator full of body parts and photos of horrors when one victim escaped. Dahmer received 15 consecutive life sentences in 1992, avoiding the death penalty due to Wisconsin law. But on November 28, 1994, while on work detail cleaning prison bathrooms at Columbia Correctional Institution, fellow inmate Christopher Scarver attacked him. Scarver struck Dahmer twice in the head and once more as he fell, crushing his skull. Dahmer was pronounced dead an hour later from severe head trauma. Scarver claimed divine voices commanded him, saying Dahmer deserved it for mocking other inmates with food shaped like body parts. A man who desecrated bodies met a violent, bloody end himself. Moving on to John Wayne Gacy, the Killer Clown. He murdered at least 33 young men and teenage boys in the 1970s, luring them to his Chicago area home under pretense of construction work or drugs. He raped, tortured, strangled them, then buried most under his house crawl space, where the stench eventually gave him away. By day, he was a successful contractor, Democratic precinct captain, and performed as Pogo, the clown at children's events pure nightmare fuel. Convicted in 1980, he spent 14 years on death row. On May 10, 1994, at Stateville Correctional Center in Illinois, Gacy was executed by lethal injection. His last meal was generous, a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken, French fries, a dozen fried shrimp, fresh strawberries, and a Diet Coke. He joked with guards and made no apology. His final words were defiant, "Kiss my ass," as sodium thiopental, pancuronium bromide, and potassium chloride flowed. He snored loudly for several minutes before his heart stopped. A man who buried victims alive in terror died peacefully, almost comically snoring his way out like the punchline to his own sick joke. Era 81 of real feelers. Between 1989 and 1990, she shot 7 men along Florida highways, claiming silks were fault. Prosecutors argued robbery and rage motivated her. Her troubled life abuse, prostitution, Mental health struggles fueled sympathy in some circles. But the brutality was undeniable. Convicted and sentenced to death in Florida, she was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002. She refused a last meal. In her final statement, she ranted against corrupt cops, the system, and Hollywood, saying, "I'll be back like Independence Day," before cursing everyone. At 46, she died defiant, unrepentant, staring down the witnesses. One of the rare women on death row, her end closed a chapter of rage-fueled vengeance. Albert Fish the Gray Man, or Werewolf of Wisteria. This cannibal and child predator confessed to murdering multiple children in the 1920s and 30s. Most famously Grace Budd, Warmelu Red, killed, dismembered, and then sent haunting led to a family describing the act in detail. He inserted needles into his own pelvis for pleasure and claimed hundreds of victims, though only a few were proven. Executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing Prison in New York on January 16, 1936. At 65, he reportedly helped attendants adjust the straps and electrodes, saying he wanted maximum pain. When the current hit, he smiled, calling it the supreme thrill. His body jerked and smoked. "There are they quickly." A sadistic masochist who sought agony found it in his final moments. Ed Gein inspiration behind Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And Silence of the Lambs Buffalo Bill, the grave robber and murderer from Plainfield, Wisconsin. The Kimfield, på 1950s was for skinning tem. And crafting household items like lampshades, masks, and clothing from human skin and bones. He lived alone with his mother's preserved corpse. Ruled legally insane, he avoided execution and spent his remaining years in a mental hospital. He died quietly of respiratory failure and cancer complications on July 26, 1984, at age 77. No fireworks, just a slow fade in a secure ward. Far from the spotlight his horrors once commanded. Dennis Rader the BTK Killer, standing for bind, torture, kill. From 1974 to 1991, he murdered 10 people in Wichita, Kansas families. Individuals binding victims with ropes or pantyhose, torturing them psychologically and physically before strangling them. He taunted police with letters and packages for decades, then resurfaced in 2000 with more communications, leading to his arrest via a traceable floppy disk. Sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms in 2005, no parole possible. As of 2026, he's still alive in El Dorado Correctional Facility. Now in his 80s, serving out eternity behind bars. No dramatic death yet. For a killer obsessed with control and notoriety, the slow rot of lifelong imprisonment forgotten by most may be the cruelest fate of all. And finally, Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. He confessed to 49 murders, likely more of mostly prostitutes and runaways in Washington state, from 1982 and 1998. He strangled them, dumped bodies in rivers and woods, sometimes returning to violate corpses. Through a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, he received life without parole in 2003. As of 2026, he's still alive in prison, now in his late 70s. No execution. Just decades ahead, staring at walls, reflecting or not on the lives he extinguished. Expanding the list further, let's touch on others whose ends were equally telling. H. Holmes, the 19th century Chicago killer who built a murder hotel during the World's Fair. Confessed to 27, but likely more. Hanged in 1896 after a trial that captivated the nation, his neck snapped in the noose. A quick but public spectacle for America's first documented serial killer. Harold Shipman, the British doctor who killed perhaps 250 patients with drug overdoses. Convicted in 2000, he hanged himself in prison in 2004. Silencing himself before more could be revealed. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who terrorized California in the 1980s with satanic rituals and home invasions. Died of complications from B-cell lymphoma, while on death row in 2000, 30 no execution needed. Disease claimed him. Samuel Little, who murders kids, mostly strangling vulnerable women. He died in prison in 2020 of natural causes in his 80s. After FBI verification began confirming his claims. These killers, whether executed swiftly, murdered in prison, fading slowly in cells, or succumbing to illness so paterne few escape justice forever. Some met violent ends mirroring their cruelty. Others lingered, punished by time itself. So there you have it, the grim finales of monsters who believed they were untouchable. Some deaths were fast and fiery, others drawn out and pathetic. Justice, when it came, was rarely kind. Karma doesn't always rush in, but its arrival is seldom gentle. If you want more dark history, like this dictator's last moments, pirate executions, war criminal fates, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Next up, how every notorious pirate died. See you there.